To Intuitive Diary. My guest today is Barbara Condron, and she is an expert on dreams. I'm so excited to hear about her views on dream interpretation, both nighttime dreams and probably some meditative insights as well. So, Barbara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's so nice to see you. And I have been using your material. You've written many books about dreams and such. And I've been using your material since 1989. And it is a rich volume of understanding the symbolism that is within our mind at night when we sleep. So, how did you get started with all of this?
This is a wonderful place to begin, right? Where do we all begin with anything? And I'm so invested in parents working with their children because children have dreams and they're usually nightmares. And that's what happened to me. That's how I got started. At 6 years old, I woke up and I had a dream that I've written about, I've talked about, and the basic story is that I'm going through the house and I hear some strange noise that's in the basement. And I'm going down the hallway and I get to the basement door and I'm not supposed to go down to the basement because I'm young, I'm young. I've got all those rules right in my head, even in the dream. And I know I'm not supposed to go down there, but I see a light down there and I hear some tink, tink, tink kind of sounds. And I'm curious. So I start going down and I see my dad, but he's turned away from me. And when I see him, he hears me and he goes, and I don't know what's happening. I'm halfway down the stairs, and he turns around. And when he turns around, he's got his hands to his mouth, and there's blood coming, through his hands. And of course, it scares me really badly. And so I turn around, run upstairs. I start running through the house. I go upstairs. I'm looking for mom, and I can't find her anywhere. And I end up going out the front door to it's nighttime because there's street lights. And I go out the front door down to the street, and it's like it's really quiet. I mean, there's nobody there. There are a couple cars and neighbors, things like that, but it's like there's nothing there. And so I turn around, and when I do, I look at the house, and it's like a two-story white house, and my mom and dad are standing on the porch that's open, and there's light over their head. And I'm really happy because I think, oh my gosh, well, they found each other and everything's okay. So I start running up the sidewalk. And as I get closer, I realize that my dad, in place of his head, is a mole like creature. And it completely unnerves me. And I wake up and I'm really scared. I'm crying, typical childhood nightmare where I'm in it and it's like I'm scared. And so I just run to my parents' bedroom. I know which side of the bed mom sleeps on, so I go on her side. That's kind of natural kind of defense on a kid's end, right? And so I go on her side of the bed and I'm trying to be quiet. And she wakes up immediately and she starts hugging me. She said, "Honey, are you okay?" And I'm nodding my head because I can't talk. And she said, "Are you sick?" That was the first question. Second question, "Are you sick?" And I'm not sick. And she said, "Did you have a bad dream?" And it's like, yeah, bingo. She got the said the right question. And so she hugs me. She says, "It's okay. It's over. It was just a dream." And then she says something that just clicked in my consciousness, and it wasn't real. And later, of course, as I grew older, I knew that she was comforting me. She was giving me exactly what I needed, which was love and attention and all of that immediate kind of healing. But when she said it wasn't real, in my head, I remember screaming as a 6-year old. I didn't say it out loud. Inside, I was going, but it was real. It was real. It was real. And there was such a drive inside that I wanted to communicate. I wanted to tell the dream. I wanted her to know. I wanted to know what it meant. I was scared. It was like, dad was asleep in the other side of the bed and he seemed okay, but it was like there was just too much emotional defrag, confusion, and it needed a place to go. And there wasn't any place if my mother said it wasn't real because she wasn't going to hear it. She wasn't going to, they used to comment on me. I lived around adults and they used to comment that I was a great pretender, that I knew how to pretend because I was a single child. We were living in a business. We had a motel business. So we lived in the business itself. So I had no neighbors. So the only contact I had with kids my own age was when we went to church or when I'd started going to kindergarten, which I had done. And that dream actually relates to kindergarten that I found out years later. Um, and it was a unique childhood, but everybody's is. But it was in that kind of a bubble that I was raised. So I had a lot of time to myself. I had a lot of time for reflection. I had a lot of time to entertain myself and to learn about me and who I was. And then I learned who I wasn't when I went to school and got around a whole bunch of other kids. And that was an interesting experience too. But all of that began to craft the dreaming because when I was thinking about this, and I've been thinking a lot because I'm working with a website now and I'm working with offerings that I want to, how I want to frame dreams for people now with what my experience is and what I do know and what I have learned and to make it useful for as many people as possible. And when I think about dreaming in the first 21 years of our lives, I defer to Rudolf Steiner, and I won't go deeply into him, but he is worth anybody's time and trouble because he was completely brilliant in every way. Um, he really went deep into what I'm talking about too, which is it starts in childhood. And then what do you do with it as you keep going through your life? And the first 7 years, and this bears out now scientifically in neuroscience and all of the breakthroughs that the Western science world is making, but it's ancient science. You know, it's been here in the Vedas in India. It's been here in indigenous people for tens of thousands of years. That we know that there's a kind of cycle that the body goes through, and there's a lot of interfering with that that's happening right now, which is interesting also. But that's a whole other topic too. In the first 7 years is what Richard Rudd picks up from Steiner, and he's the creator of the gene keys, which is also worth pursuing. Um, he talks about the first 7 years being the spiritual quotient. We know about IQ, that's kind of well curated now. It's been there my entire lifetime, I think, which is, you know, a good 7 decades. So it's like we know about IQ. We don't know about emotional quotient. That's relatively new in terms of academia and the speak and our awareness of what we need. And then before that, there's the spiritual quotient. There's that soul that comes in that is in a body, all of a sudden has incarned into the flesh, which is what that means. We've come into the flesh, and the soul comes with a mission, but we have to accept this body that's pretty blank. I mean, it's a starter kit. It's like having a car, but you don't know what to do with it and how to run it, but you know you want to go everywhere with it, right? So it's very much the car is your body in a dream. When you have that symbol in a dream, it's indicating your physical body. So there's that piece. Um, the first 7 years is that time when, if we do have time alone, and I do attribute a lot of the way this life has turned out, the way I've lived it, to the fact that I did spend so much time on my own, not with other kids, not with brothers or sisters, you know, and I went through all kinds of things with that, with how, you know, having wanted that and how precious that is. And that's been my message to people who have a lot of brothers and sisters, that, you know, you're very fortunate, appreciate it. However, we use what we have. And when we appreciate what we're given and we respond to it completely, then we tend to fulfill the first dream. Because I found that there are 3 dreams that everyone has during a lifetime. And the first one is the soul's dream. It's the dream that your soul wants to live. It's the dream that your soul wants to bring to life. It is the dream that you have come on world, on planet with a mission. If you want to go there, you can go there, because I certainly see a lot of that being realized and being true. And so if we're coming in and we're actually meeting our soul, then how we grow up, the environment around us makes a lot of difference. You know, was it bad that my mother didn't know what to say about my dream or wouldn't at least listen to it? Not really. She gave me exactly what she had to give. She gave me exactly what I needed, which was love and security. That's what I needed first and foremost. I didn't need a dream interpreter. But I often thought as I grew older that it would have been really nice to have had one. So by the time my son was born, he was raised with dream awareness from day one. actually before that, when I was pregnant, when I was carrying the child, that the soul would come in to claim. I was writing the Dreamer's Dictionary. So in that way, this soul didn't even have a chance. I mean, he knew exactly what he was coming into. His whole body was being produced with those thoughts. And this is a little, side note to parents and women who want to have children or who are pregnant, that yes, your diet is essential in nourishing that embryo that's turning into a fetus inside your own body, and it's going to stand on its own in such a short period of time. And I mean, what a wonder that is, right? It's just amazing to me. And physically, taking care of yourself is important. Diet, movement, all of that. But your mental posture and your emotional climate is essential to the well-being of the child, not just yours and your husband, mates, your families, but the child's, because that body is responding to your thoughts as it's growing inside you. So there's a lot of dream work that I've done with unraveling those pieces, because I found that both the attitude of the mother and the father at the time of birth, astrologers will talk about it in terms of where the spatial read is, which is important and needs attention from us. But local, very local. I mean, here and now, right? It's like what's happening inside the mother, mentally, emotionally, and physically when she's giving birth, and the father. And even if the father's not present, has a mark on that child from the very beginning. And so this is all like deep Tibetan dream work when you're talking on this level. And later, if we want to go into that, I'll talk about when I met the Dalai Lama, and that flipped the whole thing and prepared me for my dad dying. And that's part of the dream arc that goes on here.
Well, let's go back to that dream that you had as a child, because
Okay.
I know our audience, if they're not familiar with dream interpretation at all, will want to have some just real practical, good advice on it. Okay, how did you unpack that dream and make some sense of it later on in your life? And what did it tell you about that child at 6 that later on could understand dreams?
Excellent question. So after I went through my minister and then I went through teachers in school and even college, couldn't find any answers. Then I got to a point where I went through a pretty dark time, which is similar to what a lot of people are experiencing now, particularly around that age, around the age of 18 to 22, right in there. And just thinking the American dream was a bill of goods that I'd been sold, that it was not going to happen for me. My whole thing was everything about the American dream for me was plummeting. And I became, in my mind, not in my actions, but in my mind, I became very suicidal. I began intellectually playing with, is it time just not to be here? I'm just not supposed to be here. And I worked through that. And I had enough of a psychology background at that point. And I was grounded enough that I wasn't going to do something foolish, but I did think it through, even to how I would end up ending my life if I was going to choose that. And there were two things that stopped me, Linda. Two things. One was that even though my life was hell, I didn't know I was not at peace inside myself to know if what came after death wouldn't be just as bad or worse. So it was a big gamble. And so that was one thing that made me pause and really stop and not do something that, in my estimation, would have been foolish. Second thing that stopped me was my parents, because I was their only child. And when I could be present with the fact and begin to become lucid again in this, emotional pain and all that thing that was going on that was just very, very real, when I could clean that enough and I could realize, Barbara, you're not gonna, this is stupid. This is me talking to me, not to someone else, to me. This is stupid. You've had some hard knocks. You want to give up, but you're here for a reason and you need to stay here and find out what it is. So when I got to my mom and dad, I thought, I can't do this to them. Of any thought that I could ever have, one of the top 10 worst thoughts would be that your son or daughter commits suicide and you were clueless. because that would have been their case. They would have not had even an inkling as to what their daughter was going through because I didn't tell them. So I could not, in conscience, in honesty, give that legacy to them. That, just was totally against the grain of who I was. So I gone through this, what later I saw as an emptiness. The Buddhists talk about bliss and emptiness. This actually was an emptiness. And it changed the way I see suicide. It changed the way I see depression. And that happened at 22. So at age 22, this had just gone on. This was right before my birthday in 1975. And in the summer, early summer, a friend of mine calls and says, I'm going to get an intuitive report from the School of Metaphysics. And I went, oh, really? What's that? And Erna, who was my friend, we'd been roommates in college. She was a respiratory therapist. So she was very practically oriented, but she could also be kind of very airy. She was a Gemini, if people know about astrology. She was Gemini. And she was beautiful and wonderful. And I was very protective of her because she could be misled very easily by people. We'd been through some of those situations together. So I said, I'd like to hear about it. And so we had dinner and she talked about it and I said, well, if you're really set on doing it, go ahead. And then I really want to hear about it when you have it. So she did. She told me about it. She called me. We met again. That's how I started the School of Metaphysics, was going as a friend to her to a class that she didn't want to go to by herself. And it all was involved with the intuitive diary. All the intuition stuff was there from the very beginning. And I wasn't really interested in that. I hadn't been raised around it a lot. I've been raised around faith and belief and knowing those kinds of things, but not in intuition. This is 1975. So it's not like Google and you can find it anywhere. It wasn't part of my life. I was a Midwestern girl and that was, salt of the earth kind of person, right? So I went to the class, the first night of class. At the end of class, the teacher, who's like a year and a half older than I am, says, part of this class is going to be dreams. And I'm like, I'm there, right? Because I've been through everybody trying to find out what my dream meant. And she said, if you have a dream, she said, write them down. She was giving the basics of writing them down, bring them to class every week. We will spend time at the end of class talking about dreams. We'll learn the symbology of it. We'll go deep dive into what it means for you, what it means in your life. And I'm thinking, how can this be? That's what I'm thinking. It was like Alice in Wonderland. It was like all of a sudden I was transported into a whole different universe of all these people through my life said, I don't know. Maybe you'll find out if you're meant to know, then God will send somebody, all this, that kind of thing. And here's a girl who's about my age and she's saying, I can help you with this. And so, I had to suspend my disbelief and go, this might just be the answer to your prayer. So I told her the dream. And to get to your point specifically in terms of symbology, she told the class, all of us, that there are certain principles to dream. First is that every dream is about the dreamer. In other words, our dreams are going to be telling us about us. They come from us, from what I refer to as the subconscious mind, not unconscious, subconscious, which is a creative part of mind. They come to us as a link to soul. And so the symbology that it speaks is images. Out here in the physical everyday world, we talk in words or in actions until we get the words. In the mind, the language is images or pictures. And so every picture, every image has a meaning that actually has come from form and function. It's not that somebody just, wrote it up. It's like, it took me 20 years to write the dictionary because for many reasons, but it was because I wanted people to know it was a dictionary, that it actually is a window into understanding what the symbology is, because the symbology does change. And there's a whole nother podcast on that with virtual dreaming right now that's new and developing. It changes as we change, as humanity changes. So she said, everybody in the dream is you. And I was telling her, about the kid dream. And she said, so your mother and your father were aspects of you, and they're aspects of what we'll call the superconscious mind. Now, what's that? Superconscious mind is pretty much what it says. It's, there's a lot of talk about superpowers now and things like that, but it is this beyond your ego, beyond the limitations of your physical roles and archetypes and all that. There's like a prototype in evolution of what it is to be self-aware, what it is to be realized, what it is to be actualized, what it is to be God conscious. And this is centuries and centuries and centuries old. This is not new talk. This is man has been seeking and wanting that connection all along, and it's always within him in the dreams. The Aboriginal people say that dream time is where everybody's trying to keep that we keep trying to get back to. And we don't need to get back to it. We need to be here with it because it's here and now. It's in the power of our own mind. And so the dream was talking about my relationship with my own superconscious mind. My dad, being the male, is that dynamic yang energy of pushing. My mother was the yin, the drawing, the pulling too. My dad was in the basement. The basement, the house in a dream, represents the mind. And if you think of a house in levels, and the interesting thing about this dream, Linda, was that that was not the house I lived in. We didn't live in a house. We never did live in a house. I grew up not living in a house. We had living quarters, and it was either part of the office in the motel business in the first years of my life. It was like living quarters off the office, which was in the center. It was not a house. It didn't have a yard. It didn't have neighbors. It was a different kind of living environment, but it was my house. So it was my mind. In this dream, I had that white picket fence type of house, 2 stories, attic, all of it. The one of my daydreams was in my dream. So it was this way that I was looking at my mind, and the basement in a dream, anybody's dream, is going to represent the unconscious mind. And I do distinguish that from subconscious. Very, different prefixes, they mean different things. They're not the same. Unconscious is your state of awareness. You're either conscious of things or you're unconscious. Jung did this really well. Anybody interested in that? Jung is a good partner. Going into the basement, I was going into my unconscious mind, the things that I was not aware of, I didn't know. And my dad was there. There was something connected with the superconscious mind. He was injured. And I realized that, I don't think I said this, he was trying to move a pipe and it was rusty. And the wrench slipped because it gave and it hit him in the mouth. And so what it did was it knocked his teeth, and that's where the blood was coming from. The hands in my dream were purpose. The blood is a symbol for truth. And you'll also find this in Holy Scriptures. It's very interesting when you start using the dream language to understand Holy Scriptures all over the world. They begin all of a sudden magically to say the same thing instead of something different. There's a book that I put together with 4 different authors called The Bible Interpreted in Dream Symbols. If someone's interested in that, that's a good place to start. When I ran upstairs, I was looking for Mom. I was looking for some kind of understanding, the yin, the drawing. I want understanding here of this experience. Running out in the nighttime. The nighttime is another symbol for darkness, things that you can't see, things that you can't identify. It can represent fears depending upon your emotional attitude in the dream. And so when I came back and ran up to the house, and I get almost to Mom and Dad, and I realized there's this mole creature. It's not my dad. So, it's like it's a monster dream. It would be the same as any child's monster dream. It was just my variation. But it was the fact that everything had changed in terms of how I was looking at life. My mind itself had changed. The unconscious material had changed. My relationship with my mom and dad had changed. My dad had changed radically into something that was going to have to become a little bit more compulsive and a little bit more habitual. What had happened? How does all that fit? How it fit was what had happened that week in my life. And what had happened that week in my life is that I had changed schools. I had gone to kindergarten at one school and I was completely happy, satisfied. They changed school districts on me, which of course I didn't know at that age. None of that, at that age. they changed school districts and I had to go to a new school, which of course there was a lot of hype about to help get the kids excited, but there was no lawn yet. It was totally new. There was no lawn yet. It was all strangers. Any of the people that I'd met, the kids that I'd met at the other school that I made friends with, none of them were there. It was a completely foreign environment to me. All of my unconscious fears came out. I felt abandoned when my mom left me at school that day, all that kind of thing. It was awful. It was one of the worst days of my life and very dramatic about it, and nobody to talk to about it.
So all of that fed
Yeah,
your nighttime dream and came out, which you were very frightened about, but you didn't understand fully what your mind was telling you at that time. And neither could anyone else until you were, what, 22 before you found out what this might represent for you?
exactly. So that night at 20, I was 22, and she said, "Tell me your dreams." I trusted and I told her the dream, and she gave me insight. And it took me, Linda. I didn't understand it immediately because it was all new to me, just like it will be to many of your listeners and the people who are watching. It's like they won't know because, so it's just considering, it sifts into your consciousness over time, just like dreams do. We end up cutting that off. We cut off our faculty to dream. And when we do, we in essence are cutting ourselves from our soul. And that's why people go through life and they think, I know I have a soul somewhere. I don't know where it is, and I want to make my soul happy when I die. And I want to go, in other words, all of their daydreaming then becomes geared toward out here thinking what other people think. And not to diss that because it's very important. Our relationships with other people are very important, and the people we choose to partner with are important. But the answers are inside. The first reference, I call it first person science. The first person science on anything with you needs to be you. So to understand that there's an inner part of you that's attempting to communicate every time you go to sleep, that's the beauty of it. Every time we shut down our conscious mind, we have an opportunity to remember a dream. And there are many, many, many different experiments and all kinds of things now with dreams. For 12 years, I conducted global dreaming experiments from 2007 until 2013, and through the School of Metaphysics at the college. And that included eventually 36 different countries, up to the largest one that we had, I believe, was 236 people, I think 32 people, something like that participated in a dream experiment together from all over the world. And what we learned in that, this was what, once I began to learn about dreams and I stayed with the School of Metaphysics, studied, and then kept teaching for over 40 years as my life's work. So that became the second kind of dream that people will have. The first dream comes from your soul, and you're going to remember it in your early years. And whether you're encouraged to remember it and talk about it makes a difference. It makes all the difference. The United States of America is not a culture that values dreaming. It has people within it that come from cultures that do. But America itself does not value dreaming. There's the American dream, but I just told you a really brief, snippet of how that crashed for me, but it birthed the next 40 years because it led to me being completely open to whatever was going to happen several weeks later. And what happened was a school that teaches metaphysics, which its purpose is to usher in intuitive spiritual man, that became my mission, my life's work for decades. And all of it revolved around not only night dreaming, but daydreaming and how the two fit together. So by the time I wrote the Dreamer's Dictionary and it was published, I guess it was a couple years before that, all of these dream things started happening, right? Which is the second dream that you'll have are the ones that you're making. Because your night dreams are always going to respond to you and your life right now. They're going to tell you the state of your awareness if you'll listen. if you respond to what you hear and you learn how to decode the dream, then you can make choices in your life that are soul aligned. Pythagoras, Pythagorean theorem from way back in geometry. Pythagoras had a school, a philosophy school, and he studied all of this stuff. That's why he could come up with the theorem that's still used centuries later. His school, if you wanted in his school, you had to take a vow to be silent for 5 years. That's how important silence is. People don't remember their dreams when they wake up with an alarm clock and they go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bam, here I go. And they're worrying about the day. They're worrying about if they're late. They're worrying about, who's going to get in the bathroom first, whatever. I mean, we have a good time, yes, but don't make that good time at the expense of your relationship with your soul, because it's your relationship with your soul that carries you forward, that eventually lets you know that life is like a dream, like the Tibetan dream yogas teach, that it is a dream, that there really is no death. I didn't know, Linda, that the third dream, which is the way that you exit, I didn't know how all of this dream work that I did all of my life, how it would return in such, that investment would return in dividends when my dad began the last 7 years of his life going down with Lewy body dementia. I had no idea till I got there. I had no clue. But when he got to the point where he was telling me about his dreams, I knew exactly where he was in his process. There was no question in my mind. When he told me about what someone else would call hallucinations, and they were not drug induced because he wasn't taking his kind of dementia, you don't mess with that. You let it be what it is. And what I learned from his denouement, his end of story, is that modern science had actually extended his life 4 times. He'd had heart surgery, he'd had angioplasty, he almost died of bleeding ulcers, and would have if he hadn't been in the hospital. When I was in 12th, no, when I was around 12 years old, I was in like 7th, 8th grade. So he could have died 4 times. Near-death experiences are very, very important in the process of understanding our dreams. And so by the time he got there, I could receive him. I could walk with him in his mind. It was a reality for me. It wasn't pretend. It wasn't make up. It was perception. And it was a perception that had been curated through hundreds and thousands of dreams, recording my own, working with other people. With all just the research of those 12 years, there's an estimated around 35,000 dreams that I looked at, worked with people on, interpreted, whatever. I mean, there's a great body of information there that's incredible.
What are some of the what are some of the more unusual dreams that you have interpreted, and what made them relevant to that person? Are there just some examples that you can give us?
There's a simple example like somebody dreaming of a rainbow that it was leading them around. It's kind of like a balloon or a cloud, and it's leading them around. And this was a dream of a 14-year-old, and it was when they were beginning to understand gender. They were beginning to understand what it meant to be a woman. In this case, it was a girl. And she, in the dream itself, it changed from black cloud in the beginning of the dream that was all around her, and then it kind of moved away from her, and it moved up, and then it turned into a rainbow. And that dream was talking about the black cloud was all the emotional clutter from everybody around her and what they were saying or not saying and this kind of thing, and her reactions to it, the darkness of it, the heaviness of it. And it was a client. So, then it was a deep dive into undoing some of the work of some of the trauma that her mother had had. The insights that professionals can gain through understanding dream work it's phenomenal. It's just like the dream will always tell the parent what the child is thinking at any age. And that in itself is invaluable. There have been some dreams lately of that same black cloud, and it's kind of on my mind, so that's why it came up, I think. But that dream was like, oh my God, 35 years ago, 40 years ago. More recently, in recent years, there have been dreams, and one was of a person who had gone through the one of the runs of the Om Challenge. And near the end of it, he dreamed part of the dream. It was a 4-part dream, but part of the dream was that he was in a neighborhood and there was like a black fog that was starting to come and it was just moving. And everywhere it moved, the feeling he had was that it ate up everything that it came into, it swallowed it up. And it came to him and it went through him and he was still there. And he wondered why it had made other people disappear, but not him, because that was the reality in his dream. And so that's what we really deep dived on in terms of what was happening. And we ended up even floating the idea that this is probably the whole EMF and Wi-Fi that we've got going on now that we're even using to do this, right? But it is something we have to adapt to in order to survive. We do have to adapt, and we will. Human beings are incredibly adaptive. But it's that black fog. It's like all the things we don't know, the existential threat, wherever you want to name it. It's like it's everywhere you look. It's like, are humans going to survive? That kind of thing. So there's this black cloud that's starting to appear in people's dreams. I've studied that over time and space. There's these dreams that we tend to gravitate toward, like dreams of caves, for instance. Caves and dreams have a long, long history. And it's because that's where people used to live. It used to be their house. And then we have dreams about water, lots of water. Water in a dream is always going to be talking about your conscious life experiences. What's going on during your day? How are you running your everyday life? Are you drowning in it? Is it raining, but you're not getting wet? The way that the symbol is used in your dream is totally unique to you. And it's telling you a story about you. There are dreams about shape-shifting. There are dreams about being a different sex. And of course, now that's a topic of discussion at least on the net in the first world. But it's like, come back away from that and realize that that's an old image of being able to be both feminine and masculine, to know when to wait and when to act. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that. So shape-shifting, there's a guy who dreamed that he was going to get married, and he turned into the bride. And it was like, he thought about that. He thought about not getting married after that dream because it was like this, it was too weird for him. And he didn't realize that it was about the fact that he was changing the way that he works with himself. That the commitment, because marriage is a commitment, it is a symbol for commitment in a dream, that the commitment is made to the inner self. The beloved is inside. And then sometimes in life, we find a beloved out here that we can enjoy life with, but not always. Always, we have the opportunity inside to make commitments to our inner self and to follow through with them, to live them. And that's like soul talk. That's like, soul whispering to you and you're listening. I call that pillow talk in some of the ways that I talk about things. Anything that you can imagine can happen in a dream.
That's true. Let me ask you a question real quick. Last week, I had 2 different dreams. And they were, because I interpret my dreams based on your book, The Dreamer's Dictionary, and I'm just going to hold it up and let people see that. But it's a fabulous book. It's a good reference book, like a dictionary. It tells you, the symbolism of the various things in your dreams. Not everything's included, but a huge, huge swath of symbolism is in that book. But I had a dream last week that kind of stumped me. I don't remember all of the specifics about it. I did write it down, but there was one like big card that had a large, bold capital R and a capital B side by side. And it's like, well, what is RB? Why in that? And then the next day, I believe it was, I had another dream And it was the word canon, all in capital letters. And there was a friend of mine who happens to be a physicist that had told me that he really didn't like words that were all in capital letters. So, but there were two capital letter dreams that I had back to back. So what would that possibly represent for me?
It would be simple, not it's not a complicated dream because it doesn't move, it's not a motion picture. So it's a stationary image. So there's something that you are focusing your mind on that has to do with the alphabet. And so what's an alphabet? An alphabet are the symbols that enable a communication to occur. So when we're talking about mind and how the creative mind works, we're talking about something has been going on in your mind that you want an object of desire. You want a way that you can focus on this that's going to bring clarity. So R and C, right?
Was R and B on the
R&B.
first dream is R and B in big, bold, very, very non-ornate lettering, but bold.
Very clear. So your subconscious mind is giving it to you very clear and saying, clearly, you want to focus on this. So my question to you would be, when you hear R and B, what comes to your conscious mind?
Well, it hadn't before now, but as you put it out there in a verbal term, I thought of R&B music, rhythm and blues. It was a music, a rhythm to it.
So that's where I would start. I would start with that. And if I woken up with a dream, that's what I would have done. I would have just rested and see what R&B means, right? So that's a clue for as you wake up with it. Because then you're in twilight dreaming. That's what I call twilight dreaming. There's daydreaming, night dreaming, twilight dreaming. You want to really learn to live in twilight because that's the intuitive part, Linda. That's the part that you have curated all your life, and in being able to work with other people and develop the insight that you have intuitively. You function in that reverie state, or the honeymoon effect is what it's called sometimes, but it's that state between the two where the conscious mind and subconscious mind are working in tandem together. And so R&B being rhythm and blues, then that would be the rhythm. Your subconscious mind would be using that to say, get very specific about the rhythm or the cadence, the beat of what you're doing, because it's pertinent to when you had the dream. And the blues could be anything from turn down the volume, depress it a little bit, compress it, that kind of thing. It could be that kind of blues, an emotional kind of blues. It could be a melancholy. It could be sadness, and the color wasn't in the dream. What was the color?
The letters were black. They were just a bold black on a white background, very simple.
Okay. And it's like there was nothing else. It was just like the card, and that was it. Nobody was holding it. You couldn't tell where it was. It was just that, right?
It was just there. Yeah.
So it's a freeze frame. It's like if people know about heart math, if not, check it out. Heart math talks about freeze frame, which is nothing more than, or is everything, as holding an image in your mind steady. Like if I say, think of your mother, then you're going to have this mental image of your mother in your mind. And if I ask you what color her eyes were, it's kind of amazing that a lot of people can't tell. They can't tell you. So when I work with them, I say, hold the image of her. And we may even kind of work into it, talk it a little bit into it, all that. And many people will begin to relax enough that their memory comes forward and the entrainment's there, and they can tell, oh yeah, they were brown. That's how you want to work with yourself when you wake up in the morning with a dream. You want to be able to hold your conscious mind steady, not run to the bathroom. Hold your mind steady so that those inner echoes can keep coming, because they will fade. But if you're steady, you can even call them back. So the card was a freeze frame. Whatever was happening the day before or 48 hours before you had the dream, your subconscious mind was saying, Linda, freeze frame on this. It's black and white. It's extreme. It's one thing to the other. In between that is the R and the B. So if it means rhythm to you And if it means blues, then you need to look at blues and what that means. What is blues? Does it mean that you're kind of melancholy and kind of sad, or does it mean something else?
It would be getting in touch with your emotions to me, because a lot of the blues music and rhythm and blues is a different type style even than just blues by itself, but it is a type of music that I enjoy very much. So
Okay. So in that way, that's kind of cool because I would think that probably if you keep dreaming along this same line, if that freeze frame begins to move for you, you probably will end up having some music that you're familiar with that you really like, and that'll
yes.
be another, message in it. But it was like be steady, slow down, stop. If it was my dreams, that's what I would do. I would stop. Okay, well, what is it? What do I need to have a rhythm with? And emotional. Where is my emotional rhythm? Do I have it? Have I lost it? What is it in it that I need to focus on? Then your dream a couple days later is all caps too. Canon, and how is it spelled?
Cannon.
Okay, so did you see that as a name maybe of
I
a
didn't
person?
know for sure if it was a name or just a word, but it was all caps, not bold like the R&B was. It was very gentle, but it was also still frame. But it was more also the message that, that this friend of mine did not like all capital lettered words.
So was that a thought you had when you woke up, or was it in the dream that you
It was in
remembered?
the dream. Yeah, that was
Okay,
part of the dream. Yes.
okay, so that becomes the key more than canon.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is because even though he's not in the dream, he's linked to the message. So, as I spoke about a minute ago, people in a dream are aspects of us.
Right.
So, you would think about him, he's subconscious mind because he's male and you're female. So, he's an aspect of your subconscious mind that you know very well. You know his likes and dislikes, obviously, but look at him and think of the qualities if you're going to describe him to me. What kind of person is he? Not what he does and all that, but in terms of, is he, it sounds like he might be impatient with some things. Is he busy? Is he busy? Is he dedicated? Is he funny? How would you describe him in like 3 words?
In 3 words, I would say very spiritual, very intellectual, and very thorough.
Okay, so you would look at those, and then you would come back, dream mirror. The dreams are always a mirror. You come back to you and you go, okay, of those, which of those do I really resonate with the most with him?
His spirituality.
Okay, so this second card that has more letters, but you have to reach a little bit more. It's not so bold. It's not like knocking your socks off or remember me. It's like now you're getting deeper, and you're getting deeper too because you had this man, that message as part of it too. I'm looking forward to what your next messages are because I can see it's building.
Mm-hmm.
And as you look and you identify, you go, oh yeah, this is what it's talking about in my life. Then you're going to see because you're making progress, and that's how you'll know when you have the next dream. You'll know that the progress is being made, and your subconscious mind's weighing in on, okay, this is where we're going now, or this is what you want to think about now. So it's like what began as the very stark, pay attention, freeze, hold it, just wait, right? So there's some kind of extreme situation. Now it comes into it's having like emotional waves to it that are not as stark. They're not as pay attention to me. They're more subtle and they're more spiritual. They have to do with your own understanding of how the emotions work because the emotions react out here in our everyday life. That's where most people are with emotions, and that's why they don't understand them very well. And people don't know how to work with other kids and people, right? So we're learning that right now as a species. But as you work with spirituality, which I know you have, that all changes. I mean, you start claiming parts of yourself that wasn't even possible when you were 10 or 20 or 30 or 50. It just wasn't there yet. And so the consistency, the rhythm, the consistency really pays off. The canon, I don't know. I would be watching. I would be watching for signs of it. That's why I asked how it was spelled because if it was Canon, then my mind would go to spiritual canons because he's the spirit in me. very spiritual person. So I would go there, but it wasn't spelled that way. So it's spelled like a name would usually be spelled.
Yes.
Yeah. So, whether that means that there's a person
Mhm.
that you're going to meet or read about or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
very well
But I
could
would
be.
ask for another dream
Yes.
to continue
Yeah,
forward.
that's exciting. And yeah, I think it's wonderful to delve deeply into the dream state because there's just such a wealth of information there. I know over the years in just keeping this dream journal, which I have 2 volumes of books now. I mean volumes, large print, of work that I've recorded over the years. And it's really interesting to go back even and look at dreams from the past and see how much of life was revealed to me that I didn't even realize at the time it was being shown to me and just like blatantly shown to me, until I would go back and reread my dream journal. But it's just a wealth of information in those.
What's the first dream that you remember?
Oh, I don't have a time frame on that, honestly. I wasn't something I paid a lot of attention to when I was young. I do remember having one dream as a teenager that was really scary to me because this person, I saw them and they were just like frantic in front of me, and it really scared me. And then that actually happened within a few days or weeks after that. They were frantic in front of me in exactly the way that I saw that dream. So that did stand out to me, but it was really, I was a teenager by then before that dream was before I remember putting any kind of relevancy on a dream.
Did that start your dream journaling? You're writing
No,
down.
no, no. That it was many, many years later that I started dream journaling. Yeah.
I've met a lot of people that, particularly women, girls, who do get into writing down dreams early, especially now. That's how much the time has changed since you and I were young. Then it was like waste of time, but it's like now it's not so much that for a lot of young women, which I think is really good. I'm trained as a journalist, University of Missouri grad, um, and have used that in my work all along. And it's ended up integrating so nicely with the dream, where I realize now that I am a dream journalist. It's not so much I'm an expert. I have the hours for it, sure, and experience, but it's like I'm much more a dream journalist, and I help people to understand the real nuggets of diamonds that are inside their consciousness and how it comes through in the dreaming, and then how we respond in the daytime, what we're imaging, how we're directing our minds during the day. It becomes this internal dynamo of life that's transcendent, literally transcendent, where it's not normal anymore. It's not, and I call normal is the suffering. It's time that we leave behind all of the age old belief systems and passed down through generations that life is suffering. And yes, there's pain in life, just like there's pleasure. There is that up and down always, the biorhythm of it. But in that, there's a 0 point in the center that we can enter into, whereby we allow our thoughts to go up and don't make a story out of them, is one of the ways that I'll talk about it. Or we go down to the bottom and we don't make a story out of that either, because then we become neutral to the situations and we can really see who we are and what we're doing. Once that happens, we get past our own ego, our own, got to have it our way, and just the part that fights, the part that struggles, the part that creates the suffering, that is in pain and is going to let everybody know that we're in pain, and that kind of thing. And it's like, we don't have to live that way. And dream work is definitely part of freeing yourself, of liberation. That's why they talk about it with the Bardo. I ended up presenting at the International Association for the Study of Dreams. In 2018, I did a presentation on the new Bardo, which was Clear Light Legacy of Dad's Dementia. And I presented all the findings that I had come to in Arizona at that conference. And it was like, and it's up on the website, and there's different ways that I'm writing about that period of time too, because I want to get it there so people can at least be exposed to at least one person's experience, of what it is like to be a conscious dreamer all your life, to never shut it off. And when you don't shut it
Exactly.
off, you have to understand it.
Well, for someone who is just getting started to understand their dreams or to record their dreams, give me like 3 easy tips that will help them to get on that path to being able to understand their dreams more and to be able to utilize them in their life.
Excellent question. The first point that I'm going to bring up is do not sleep with your phone near your bed. That is so important for most people that would be available to, to hear this message. Leave your technology out of your bedroom. There are waves, and we are being inundated with it enough. You don't need to have it near you. So you don't want it disturbing your natural sleep. So that's actually number one. Pay attention to how you go to sleep. Want to remember your dreams, invite that, because your subconscious mind is listening. So one of the actions you can take to do that is to have some way to write your dreams down. This is another reason why you put your phone in the other room. You're going to need to write down whatever you remember when you wake up. And it may just be keywords in the beginning, but after a while, you'll develop that lucid dreaming state. So you'll be able to hold it and you'll be able to write much more. Third is once you have it written down, then avail yourself of a means to identify, to study it, to identify the symbols, to pull them out. I made a tutorial and a dream consciousness circuit journal that is available at no charge. It's free because I want people to do this. So you can order that. It's a PDF, download it. There's a tutorial that's available with it, that short videos that actually take you through the whole process of what I've learned in my whole life since I was age 6 and what works, only what works. You don't have to go through that. I can compress all that time for new people to say, this is what you do and this is what's going to pay off. Because when you approach your dreaming like a dream journalist, then you're looking for facts. You're looking for what actually happened. You're not making up stories. You're actually clearing your mind. You're very calm. You're very direct in what you're doing. So you actually get all the facts down. Then you interpret them in the language of mind, because that's universal. And then you can begin to put it into your dream. That's going from sign to symbol to significance. Those 3 steps. That's what you will learn how to do. And it will change the way you look at yourself. It'll change the way you look at life. It will change your empowerment. It will aid you to be self-assured. It will give your child confidence to think for themselves and to know their own mind. And in today's world, I don't think there's any greater gift that we can give ourselves and the people we love.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
just fantastic.
Absolutely. So, Barbara, how would people get in touch with you and find your books and be able to utilize your expertise on dreams?
They can actually, it's kind of scary to say, but they can Google my name and things will come up. And that's probably where they'll get the widest breadth of it. I do have a website, masterliving.org, and there are things that I put up there, and there's a membership that people can join, and they can meet with me once a week online, and we can talk about whatever they want to talk about. I'm trying to make things available and make myself available to aid people in any way I can. So, yeah, it's
Sounds
wonderful.
good. Well, I thank you for joining me. Wonderful talking to you about dreams, one of my favorite subjects, and thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Linda, for having me, and I so appreciate the time with you.
Thank you.